Good morning. My name is Bob Thomas. I am the Chief Operating Officer for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the Michigan Chambers Foundation series on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today's topic is cultivating belonging, embracing uniqueness and differences. The Michigan Chamber began offering this series several years ago to help inform business leaders about the DEI space and to create a community dialogue for business leaders to learn more and contribute their experiences that helps create a more inclusive culture among the business community in the state. This is the second of 3 webinars this year, and I'd like to thank our sponsors. That includes our platinum sponsor with Dow and our bronze sponsors, CATA and the Michigan Bankers Association. Today's presentation will also be interactive to the extent that we've got a chat box. If you'll please add your comments or submit questions to our panelists, that would be super helpful to keep that conversation going. So about our topic, when developing a true culture of belonging is prioritized in the workplace, it can lead to a number of positive factors, which include strong and resilient morale, decrease in turnover rates, employee well-being, and a better business innovation and outcomes. In fact, employees not having a sense of belonging is one of the 3 top reasons given for leaving a job. So our topic is very important today. I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Wendy Holmes, who is an educator and advocate for diversity and inclusion, serving as Assistant Vice President of DEI Employee Engagement and Strategic Partnerships at Comerica Bank. Wendy has effectively managed DEI initiatives, strategic partnerships, and employee engagement at Comerica, focusing on creating real opportunities for diverse talent and an inclusive environment for employees. Wendy has extensive experience in experiential marketing and events in diverse sectors. Our second panelist is Lena Turner, who is the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Salary.com. Lena leads the DEIB corporate strategy, program management, and development to include internal training, learning, and awareness events. And she's also responsible for delivery of DEIB thought leadership and external knowledge offerings for clients via the development of white papers, surveys, roundtables, and panel discussions. Lena has a long history of HR experience in compensation and strategic HR initiatives. And I'm glad you're both here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So I just want to start with maybe an overview for our audience about what's going on in the DEI landscape. Can each of you tell me and the audience about how you support your organizations right now in DEI? And Wendy, would you mind if we start with you?
Yes, absolutely. So with when we talk about DEI and how it's kind of evolved, our roles used to be more so about compliance and basic awareness training, whereas it's evolved into more strategic partnership, working across all business functions and embedding diversity and inclusion into the organization's DNA. And I would say that's what we talk about my role and the role of our DEI team, is influencing talent acquisition, leadership development, even marketing. There's also that emphasis on data and measurement. And we are also kind of shifting towards focusing a lot on intersectionality as well. And kind of moving beyond just that singular focus on race and gender and embracing more nuanced understanding of intersectionality.
That's great. And so straddling both internal and external audiences for the benefit of the company. And then Lena, how are you seeing the landscape evolving in your role?
So the landscape externally has evolved into a bit of backlash and chaos, and we all know that that's going on out there. So how do we keep focused with all that going on? And a lot of what I do is what Wendy said. There's a lot of continued emphasis on inclusion and belonging here at Salary.com, and then a lot of thought leadership for our customers, clients, and the general DEI and HR world as a whole, because I do a lot of webinars and panels. But it's evolved into really, like Wendy said, a lot of really focus on capturing the metrics and how we manage through the programs and then show a return on those programs. And in the last years, belonging has become a huge part of the four-legged tenet, as I call it. it was a lot of emphasis on DEI at first, and belonging is that thing that just puts the bow on it in terms of um, an overarching strategy around building a collaborative, inclusive environment. So I like to say we do a lot of sort of attention on diverse in terms of the numbers. But after you do that, you have to really work on programs that keep people in the organization. Those programs center around inclusivity and belonging because you can, and we'll talk a lot about this in ways later on, Bob, I know, but there are so many things that you can do to get people in the organization, but you have to be as strategic about keeping them there in the programs that you work on. So it's really evolved past just the numbers of getting diverse people from race, gender, and ethnicity, and that sort of thing.
You brought up an interesting point about the backlash from the external environment. I imagine that's very challenging then for companies who want to put an emphasis on DEIB activities within their organization. Can you speak a little bit to that? What are you seeing on the outside, and how does that influence your DEI programming inside?
I think I just had a great conversation with Mark Vickers over at HR.com in the latest research, and then we run our own survey here. So what I'm finding and what I hear and what I'm reading, and there's, if you're in DEIB, somebody wants to send you an article every day that tells you what's happening with DEIB. So I have been hearing and seeing actually articles, those leaders in those companies that are very serious and steadfast in their efforts around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, they have not changed that focus. They may have changed some of their approach. They may have changed the acronym in some respects, but those that were really serious, they're learning how to find that balance between the external factors and what they need to do internally to continue to build that collaborative environment that they are focused on.
So let's talk about belonging and how that belongs on that internal environment. It's a fairly recent addition to the DEI acronym. When we talk about belonging, what does that mean to each of your organizations, and how does that apply to DEI activities more generally?
Sure, I'll start. So when I think about when we talk about inclusion, because there's always this thing about inclusion versus belonging. So when I think about inclusion, I think more so about access, making it so that everyone has a fair opportunity for anything. When I think about belonging, I think more so about psychological safety, feeling welcome, feeling that you can be yourself, feeling that you won't be judged by being yourself. So when we talk about belonging and when we talk about what we do at our company, we really try to provide those safe spaces for our employees to be their true selves, through the work that we do through our employee resource groups, through the education that we provide by making sure that our managers understand what that means and what that looks like. But I believe, is like one of the most important components when we talk about the work that we do in DEIB, is because people can feel welcome, but if they don't feel that that they truly belong or that they can be themselves, they're not happy employees, and that's when you run into the situation of having turnover and people leaving. So that's why I think that it's truly important and definitely one of our focuses.
It's like the difference between being invited to a party and actually being a part of the party, participating, right?
Yeah, and I love that analogy. I actually have my own personal story, actually, where I actually worked at a company, and I was part of a really small team. And, I was the new kid on the block, and the team members that I was with, they had a significant amount of tenure. They'd been through a lot together. So whenever we were out on different projects, they had their own stories. And I never really felt that I was a part of that. I always felt kind of like this sore thumb, in the group. So even though I was included, I was a part of the group, I never really felt that I really belonged there, or to be honest, felt welcome. And I think that's when we talk about belonging, that feeling that you belong there and that you can participate and feel good and people are welcoming you.
I totally echo that. And I have a story about that as well. It's I was a part of it, but it wasn't exactly mine because this one is more impactful. But I believe it's when employees feel welcome, seen, heard, and supported. And everything Wendy said, Wendy, you're still in all of my thunder here, but yes, everything she said is just so important because you can invite an employee to anything. But if they don't feel like they belong, it's as if they didn't get the invitation, right?
Yes.
So I've been in compensation a long time as a part of my background. So pay equity and things like that are always very close and sort of led me into this work. But I worked on packages where we made sure we paid the diverse employee everything that they were worth from a market perspective, made them whole from wherever they were coming from. So they get into the company, right? And they're included on these outings with maybe what had been maybe a more male network before. And then they go to these things and they don't feel included. And she left within a year. All that money, all that great recruiting, all of that went out of the window because she just didn't feel included. But she was, I mean, didn't feel like she belonged. She was included. And there's a big, big difference.
Yep, definitely.
So if we get down to brass tacks, what are some of the things, initiatives, programming, integration activities that employers can do to help make employees feel like they belong?
I think
Can we start with you?
communication.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
I think communication just huge. Um, if you have communications and maybe equal to that is support from leadership around belonging initiatives and walking the walk and talking the talk. And it's as simple as starting with conversations around belonging, understanding for leaders, understanding what inclusive leadership looks like, and that way they can start to understand what it takes to make employees feel like they belong. So I believe inclusive leadership is a big thing, equipping your managers to understand what it means to actually manage a diverse team and how you make those people feel included. And it's not just making the different race and ethnicities or women, but it's something even more like having different kinds of personalities, introverts versus extroverts. How do you make those people who don't speak up in a meeting all the time, how do you make them feel like they are seen and heard, their ideas are getting across, and they feel a part of the group? Because you've got to work at that and build some sort of exercises that help all of those people really feel included and make the team more collaborative because of the great ideas that that person has. And it just takes a little bit of training, a little bit of strategic and intentional thinking in how you do that. So that's one thing I think employers can definitely do. Look beyond those obvious diverse things and start to really look at your teams and see how you can build activities that make people really feel like they belong based on who they are. So then they feel safe, like Wendy said, and they will give those ideas and they will talk up in a meeting when it's appropriate, things like that. That's one thing.
And Wendy, you come from a marketing and events background. What are some examples of how you make somebody feel like they belong once you get them into your organization?
Yeah, so before I answer that question, I just want to say, Lena, I kudos to what you said about the introvert versus extrovert, because I think that's one area of diversity that sometimes gets lost in the work sometimes. And I think that's definitely something that we should pay more attention to for sure. So I totally agree with that. And back to your question, Bob, I think when we talk about some of the initiatives, our employee resource groups, I think are really important when we talk about, some standard initiatives in fostering that culture of belonging. Because sometimes, especially people when they're new to a company, sometimes having people that they share an identity or an interest with helps to that connection and for them to feel that they belong. So I would say that's definitely one of the things that would be that's important in making employees feel welcome when they come here. I would also agree with Lena about senior leadership. That is so important that you have that buy-in, that support. I think she said, making sure that you're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. I would also say mentorship programs are really, really important as well when we talk about, that culture of belonging, because I think If someone feels that you are supporting their progress through their career, that can also help them feel that they belong, that they're getting that type of support. And then education, and I think Lena mentioned that too, just making sure that your leaders kind of understand the behaviors and that can impact how someone can feel that they belong or not belong. I think is really, really important. I think one of the things that we do as well to kind of gauge things is, employee engagement survey. We do a voice of a colleague, and I think that's also helpful because, if your employees feel that they're being heard, that also can attribute to making sure that they feel that they belong as well.
When we talk about differences and people's unique attributes that they're bringing to the workplace, those are usually the things that exclude them from feeling like they belong. How do employers then, to your point, make them feel like they're heard, or that we recognize those differences and they add value to our organization? How do those things really get down into the culture work of belonging?
I think we had a series of training and learning and development events here around DEI. Some of them are really formal training. Some of them are just learning and awareness events, as we call them. But we did something very cool. And I think part of answering your question is getting to know the differences that your teammates bring to the organization. So we did a series around diverse voices, and we had one of our employees talk about her journey in coming to the United States and coming to her place in the financial profession, and just understanding your colleagues and what they bring to the table. That's one of the first things you can do. And you don't have to have a big formal meeting by me in DEI. You can do that in your own team meeting every week. Let's hear from different teammates who represent diverse as one thing, but come from different parts of the country even, because their perspectives are going to be different. And that's what you're looking for. And that's how I think you can embed it and recognize it in the everyday workplace, and then get your team to recognize and understand, so that when they're collaborating and interacting, they are supportive of those teammates. Every teammate feels seen and heard, and that fosters that belonging feeling to me. So it doesn't have to be a huge Lena initiative that I'm calling an hour training. It can be Mr. Manager, Miss Supervisor, or whomever, however you identify, that you can guide your team into having those. And part of that is senior management pushing that down to make sure that managers, line managers are doing those things and understand that's how we draw on that belonging feeling.
And I would definitely agree. I would also add, we really utilize our employee resource groups as well. And not only do they, because I know sometimes people think of employee resource groups are more so for networking. Our employee resource groups actually do a lot of workshops where they're engaging and kind of educating our colleagues depending on the particular group that we're speaking on. So when we talk about our employee resource groups, they deliver development sessions, workshops, inspirational discussions. So, we feel that when colleagues who feel that sense of belonging, they're going to be more engaged in their work. So we try to make sure that all of our ERGs are consistent. So we deliver on 4 strategic objectives: careers, connection, community, and culture. And so through that culture piece, we make sure that we're able to reach other colleagues and offer them a sense of that particular groups, whether it's a different ethnicity, if it's a different gender. They're able to kind of engage with those colleagues, and those colleagues are able to engage with them and let them know this is me. And I think through that helps with that sense of belonging all across the board.
I agree
That's
with
great.
that. ERGs play a huge part. We recently established one called New Moms, and it's for those women coming back into the workplace. a place to talk about things that they feel are important as they come back into the workplace in terms of their development, their support, and their belonging. So I definitely think ERGs play a great part, but communication is key.
Another great example where diversity is not just surface level, it's your whole life experience as a new mom or new parent.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
We have a couple questions in the chat box that get around ERGs. Can you guys describe what ERGs you offer and well, what are they really designed there to do? It's not just for the member of that group, it's for the entire organization, correct?
Yes, definitely. And so we offer, actually, we continue to grow our employee resource groups, actually. And so to your point, Bob, our employee resource groups are open to anyone. We don't, restrict anyone to join, and we actually welcome anyone, and you don't have to identify with a particular group. And our employee resource groups, we have, an LGBTQ ERG, which is called PRISM. We actually did a few things for Pride Month. We were in the Motor City Pride Parade. We have African American Network. We have our Women's Forum. We have our Mijente, which is our Hispanic Latino ERG. We are actually about to launch a Middle Eastern employee resource group. We have a Jewish Heritage Employee Resource Group. We also have a Young Professionals Employee Resource Group. So I don't want to take up a bunch of time naming them off, but we have probably about 14. And we continue. We actually, I just want to mention this one just because it's a little bit different, but we have a rather new one called Comerica Speaks. And that particular employee resource group is just focused on allowing our colleagues an opportunity to practice on their public speaking. So they come from Toastmasters. So they're offering that resource to our colleagues and to their fellow employee resource group members as well. So we just launched that particular employee resource group as well. So to your point, it's so many different ways that you can engage our employees through those resource groups.
I love that. We don't have as many as Wendy, but we're working on, I'm going to do some focus groups and put some feelers out to see what the next interest might be. But as far as our women's resource group, their mission vision is pretty clear. And I got that when I first started doing this work. I just had these listening sessions, and that was like an easy, quick win for all of us. I heard what the women said they wanted to gather to talk more about professional development, about issues that impacted them in the workplace, understand how they could maybe hear more from the senior women leaders here, just things like that. So they do a combination of that. But what I like is that they have sort of their vision statement, and then they have some rules that they follow. We have it open to women, but it's always invited all allies, advocates for women to all of the things we have. So it's really focused on a mixture of the things. We have some serious things, and we just had sort of a Mother's Day Kentucky Derby / event that really was just fun, but also important and informative for them. So
All part of the belonging strategy, right? Have
absolutely.
fun.
Yeah.
Lena, you might have the answer to this question. Somebody wanted to know, how do you determine when or if you need to have or could have an ERG group in your organization? Is it based on size of employees? What are some factors there that you see across industry sectors that help advise that?
I think it depends on what the employees want. So you wouldn't want to create anything that's not needed or wanted, right? So my first thing always in all work is really listen, ask some questions and listen and see what you hear. Like do some pulse surveys and see what's the interest. If you're in a DEIB training session, one of your parting questions might be, have you thought about anybody who has interest in any of the following, or maybe starting an affinity group or an employee resource group? But listen to what your employees say and see where the interest is. And that's how I think the most organic and the best things are born, that you have a real interest. So it doesn't have to be you can have an ERG that's made up of 5 people. If it's important to them to get together, talk about things that impact them in the workplace and feel that common camaraderie, then I think it's worthwhile. So I think the first thing is just start to put some feelers out there, collect some information. Data is always good to start anything.
I would agree for sure. As I stated, we're about to launch a Middle Eastern employee resource group. And we don't necessarily put a number on of individuals that can start an employee resource group, but I do kind of stress with our with our colleagues that it's good to have at least 5 or 6 because there's work that has to go into that. And I would hate for someone, 1 or 2 people to kind of take that burden on themselves. So just making sure that they kind of have a support team. So again, kind of putting that filler out, as Lena mentioned. And then the other thing I would kind of mention as well is so with our employee resource groups, as I mentioned before, we go with our 4C objective, making sure that they understand that and how that employee resource group is going to be able to meet those 4Cs is one of the conversation pieces that I have with people that might be interested in starting one.
And at the end of the day, it needs to support the company values and mission, et cetera. So it'd be really difficult to have an ERG group with a very small group who's not able to do the work or to connect outside the organization. And that would be a very different activity. Correct. We had a question too about employee engagement surveys when we're starting to talk about belonging, getting their feedback. What are some questions that we might ask on an employee engagement survey, and you know, how do we get to that question about whether or not they feel like they belong? Do you have examples in your own organizations about surveys?
Go ahead, Lena.
Some of the questions I asked in the very beginning, do you feel like you belong? Just a basic question. And then I asked questions around, do you feel like this organization supports you in your work? Do you feel like this organization intends to be fair and equitable? Do you feel like you're treated fair and equitable? And things like that. And I asked from their personal perspective, and then I asked, do you feel, so it would give me some idea what the employees were feeling for themselves and give me an idea of what they were feeling about the intentions of the organization. So that way I had feedback for everybody, leadership, and for gathered for feedback from the team as well. So those are some questions like that in my pulse survey that I'm about to send out. I think I asked some basic questions about on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel like you belong? Things like that. And then maybe I'm asking, I can't remember, I just did those questions, but I made that one short, and you don't have to do anything long, but those are some ways and some of the types of questions. Do you feel like this organization treats your colleagues fairly? That's a huge question because that helps people feel a certain way about the organization, regardless if they work there or not. I have some surveys and information that says employees will not recommend you if they think you don't treat their friends fairly, even if you pay them fairly or if you treat them fairly. If they think you don't treat their so questions like that, do you think your colleagues are treated fair? Some, just what really do you want to know based on your goals at your specific organization? That might help you think of your goals and what you really want to know.
Yeah, and I would say our questions are similar to what Lena spoke to. So I wouldn't really add anything because I can't, off the top of my head, think of any other questions. I'm sure there are, but they're along the same lines of what Lena explained, just gauging the employees' thoughts on how they feel about their manager, how they feel about the company overall. Do they feel that they are being supported? Those type of questions.
Yeah, that big one that I see all the time. Do you feel supported in the ability to get your work done every day? And I love that one.
Let's use that as a segue then into management and leadership and what their role is in making sure there's a culture of belonging. So one of the questions here is about who's leading ERG groups, what is the leadership have to do with engagement surveys. I know the number one sin in surveys is if you ask somebody's opinion and you don't do anything about it.
Number one.
they
Yeah.
feel devalued, right? So how do leaders, once they get this information, get it infused into the rest of their culture with the rest of their managers and other employees so that we are really creating that culture of belonging? It's not just a top surface level item, or it's not just left for employees to handle on their own. Do you have recommendations for how leadership might infuse this in their culture?
Well, I think just from our standpoint, we definitely utilize our Voice of a Colleague engagement survey, and we actually embed in that survey an inclusion index that we're able to assess the feedback. And then based on that feedback, the leaders will look at it, and depending on what it says, will integrate actionable tasks to ensure that change can occur. So I think that we've done a good job of doing that because we have a really high rate of people that actually take the survey. So I think that says a lot too, because if your colleagues feel that their voice is being heard, they're going to continue to engage. I know, and the indicator of how much you have people that utilize those surveys is a good indicator to say whether or not you're doing something that they feel that they should really take the time out to even take the survey. I think is how we kind of utilize the survey piece. Lena, I don't know if you had anything else to
Well,
add.
another way to infuse the whole concepts of DEIB or your focus is to really craft a statement and how you feel about that and put it on your website. I think that says management right there is behind it. It's a focus for us. It lets employees know that it's a focus for us, and it lets your peers externally understand where your focus is. So I think that's a great place. It takes a little bit of, iteration and work and bouncing it up the food chain, but that was one thing we were able to do here that I'm really proud of. And I love to go to different websites and just look at their DEIB statements. And they actually, some of them, they sort of play out what it means for them, diversity, what that means, what belonging means to them, and how they have programs built around it. So that tells me management has gotten involved and they are ready to support it. And that's one way to know that, you know, we're thinking it throughout the company. The other way is to actually build it into some goals. We did something very cool last year. We had a DEIB goal in our performance management piece. Just like if I had a goal that says I'm going to work on developing relationships with clients. Well, what I do every quarter, how I get there, that's how I write it up. So we had a DEIB goal and how we learn and become aware and how we use that in our work. So those are some ways that management can support and integrate it throughout the business and the organization so that everybody feels like they play a part in building that culture.
Yeah, and if I could add a couple of other things too, when we're talking about how managers and leaders can play an important part of it, I think it's really important to establish a network of peer mentors um, to help our colleagues. Again, I feel that support piece is so important when we talk about belonging. And I think, again, when you, as an employee, feel that your company is looking out for your best interest in your career, it just kind of helps with that sense of belonging. So we actually do have a mentorship program. We also have what we call a reverse mentoring program as well, where senior leaders are mentored by the more junior colleagues as it's related to DEI. And that has been something that has been very, very helpful because again, we have to have the managers understand the goals of the DEI. And so, sometimes they have to be educated. So, that reverse mentoring program is so helpful in doing that. Additionally, we've been providing educational training. We offer a training called Fearless Teams, which incorporates the psychological safety, which again, managers have to be aware of, where are the ways that maybe where are the ways that you can be better at making an employee feel safe, that they can be themselves as well. And then also just practicing active listening. I
Oh
think
my
that's
goodness.
very,
Yes.
very, very important when we talk about the culture of belonging and being supported. I think that's also very, very important as well.
I agree. I totally agree.
It really is holistic, right? If you have that dialogue going up all levels of the organization and people feel embraced at the peer level with junior staff and with senior staff, then we're starting to accomplish that belonging component, right? So when we talk about education and training, one of our questions here is where would we find resources for education and training? If my organization is about to take on DEI, B programming, or if we have some, but it's not necessarily hitting all the boxes, where would we look for additional resources to help educate our staff to include that?
Well, there are a ton of for pay resources.
Right.
And then, you can comb the web and look at things that might be free. But if you want to do really deep dive on things like bias training, understanding microaggressions, um, then you might engage some external resources. And there's a great group called the Diversity Movement out there that does a lot of training. But for things like general training and awareness, you could work with your internal training, learning, and development team and develop it yourself. I did because I knew the things that we were interested in. I understand all of this out there. And yeah, I went away and got a certificate for leading diversity in the workplace from Rice University. They have a great DEI certification program, as many university management schools do, graduate schools do. They have those programs. But you can really work with your learning and development department and create some things in-house. So you don't have to pay for everything. But some of those things where the expertise is different than what you have in-house, or if you're just starting, like when I was just starting, I didn't have that expertise that I wanted to deliver around bias. So I worked with an external person to help me curate a good training program to deliver to my team in-house. So you can do a bit of both, I think. Some internal development with your team, but look for those resources externally that can augment that. And if somebody wants to follow up with me, I might be able to give them some different resources.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I would say definitely look internally first, and if not, externally would be good, especially if this is something that you're like starting from scratch. It's probably best to maybe look externally to get that expertise from that. But I think Lena's spot on. Starting with your learning and talent development team is probably best. For us, we've kind of been incorporating that into the work that we do, the education piece that we do, working with an external group as well. So, and I'm happy to, provide some resources as well. If you're interested, you can reach out to me as well. So between Lena and myself, I'm sure we'll be able to offer
One or
some
two.
external,
And
right.
there's some things around training that's not always so serious, but it is about learning and development. I did something here. You can do this without anybody. Find something that's interesting, you think, around culture. It could be a chef that comes in and talks about food, because what you're talking about is something that brings people together. And everybody can feel like they have a commonality around food. Or we did after work charcuterie board thing with everybody, people who just want to get together, talk about food, learn how to put something together that was edible. And then we did something around diversity in music. Everybody loves music on some level. So I happened to know somebody, got her to come in during Black History Month to talk about diversity in music. She was in pop, R&B, now she's in country. I covered a lot of people and their desire to learn about music. So you can do a lot of different things around training under the guise of learning and awareness that still helps you build that environment that you're looking to build.
You'd be surprised at how some of those things are just the vehicles to have conversations that wouldn't otherwise naturally come up in your workday, or
Exactly.
would be awkward if you did them on their own. But now
Right.
we've a safe space to talk about diversity with food or with music. Those are
And
great suggestions.
we found that commonality, that we all have something in common some way that puts us on what we feel is a safer ground. You're right, Bob. So
Absolutely. I think that's very, very important, is finding that commonality. I think it's always a good first step. when we talk about belonging, because sometimes things can be divisive. I think, but when people realize, we have more in common than you think, I think that really is that first initial step.
I agree. Agree.
So, Wendy, I know that you have a certification in DEI initiatives, and that may be a resource that folks have. Can you talk a little bit about the program that you went through and how you decided that was something that you wanted to pursue for your DEI work?
Yeah, so yes, so I am a certified diversity professional through the National Diversity Council, and that is definitely another resource you can utilize.
Big
But
reason.
it was important for our team to be certified because, again, doing the work, you have to have some type of, you have to have people, I guess, trust that you're knowledgeable in that work. So that was very important to our team to make sure that we were all certified. And the program was really, really great in covering so many different aspects to, being able to speak to DEI, how to recognize unconscious bias, microaggressions, all of the things that, sometimes we don't think about. And then also about measurement, again, which is going to be, which is very key in, making the case of why it continues to be very, very important at organizations as well. So that was kind of the reasoning behind it. I learned a lot about it, and as I said, we continue to be educated. We continue to go to workshops, continue to do that because you can never know everything. We
That's
are constantly learning as we go because the world is constantly changing. And to your point, the belonging piece being added to the DEI is just a great example of the ever evolving world of DEIB. So that's why it was really important for us to do that. And again, it was the National Diversity Council.
Great. And then Lena, so when we talk about other external resources, salary.com can also be a resource for people to connect to on all sorts of other HR issues as well as compensation. Are there other go-to resources that you would look to for DEI training?
I think the diversity movement, and it's actually called the diversity movement, is a really great one. They offer all kinds of things. Extensive. They offer certifications as well, but they offer everything from leadership training to micro videos that they're learning videos that are like 2 minutes and people can look at them. You can, sort of buy a library of those videos different ways because when you're delivering any training, you want to look at how people learn and what you want them to learn and how you can curate that together. So those are some excellent resources. In terms of pay equity, which is a big part of diversity, equity, and belonging. We offer a lot of consultation around pay equity, and we have a product that helps people look at pay equity. But paying people is one of the key ways you can put your money where your mouth is when it comes to talking about equity and belonging. It's paying them fairly, and we help companies do that all day long, every day. So
And some other resources are just a plug for your education community. Look at your universities or colleges nearby. They might have some DEI programming available. And then also our diversity chambers of commerce are great partners across the state. So if you look at the National Business League, our Black Chamber, Hispanic Chamber, et cetera, those are probably also good places to get some starter information if your company is looking for some additional resources. A new question we have in here is, do you encourage your employees to belong to professional organizations where they can also get other resources like DEIB or pay equity information? So we talk about that internally, but part of the culture is making sure that our staff also have resources outside the organization that they can bring back in.
absolutely.
Yeah,
That's something that you include?
oh
I
yeah,
definitely would.
definitely.
Josh Bersin is one of those organizations. It's like a big, huge think tank, and they have different pillars of everything: talent acquisition, DEIB, HR generalist stuff. But and I put all of this under the umbrella of building your DEI practitioner network. But becoming a part of joining any of those organizations, you learn so much because of the resources and the people that you get to meet. So if you're thinking of starting a DEIB program, you have a lot of different people that you can talk to about what you do first. I can give you probably the top 5 things that I think are key for starting or jump starting a program, but there are all these practitioners at your fingertips. But that's one, Josh Burson Academy. I think it's about $450 a year to be a part of. Totally worth it. You'll get all your money's worth in a couple of few times you attend, or you get their surveys, you get their white papers, you get infographics and things that help you build knowledge so that you don't always have to have an external person. You can start to curate some of the training and awareness on your own.
That's the Josh Burson Academy.
Yes.
I definitely agree. We definitely encourage and actually support our colleagues to seek, external development as well. We have an internal leadership development program, but we also partner with several organizations to utilize their leadership development programs, such as our Inforum is one group that we utilize their leadership development programs. It's a leadership development program for women. McKinsey is another one that we partner with in their leadership development programs. We also partner with the Hispanic Alliance for Corporate Responsibility. They have leadership development programs that we offer to our leadership to our employees as well for leadership development. So yes, we definitely encourage it, and as I said, we support that as well. So those particular costs we absorb for our employees. Again, there's obviously some vetting that goes along with that, but we definitely do that because again, we want to make sure that our employees feel supported. And we want to make sure that we're looking out for their best interests as far as their careers.
Now, the organization that I was just speaking of, it's really for DEIB practitioners or HR practitioners who might be responsible for some DEIB work. That's what I was speaking of when I talked about Josh Burson Academy. Now, anybody can join it. You can be talent management, you can be anything, but it's really for those leaders that are engaged in delivering that kind of work. So I was speaking, if you want more DEIB knowledge, if you're a DEI practitioner or responsible for delivering DEIB work, then that's a great place to get some knowledge around that.
We also talked about measurement earlier. And so what are the things that you're looking for measuring when we talk about belonging? Certainly the employee survey questions, but what are some other places that we would measure whether or not belonging is working?
We look at, we look at things like, our turnover rate, and to me, that's a big indicator if, employees are leaving, why are they leaving? So that kind of is like one of the red flags that we look at. We also, again, look at, just their general thoughts of whether or not they belong. In addition to that, I would say we look at also attrition, and we also look at the different segments as far as promotions, because sometimes that can kind of play a part as well. So those are some of the things that we look at when we look at those surveys.
I agree. I don't have a lot to add from that, but yeah, I would look at all of those things, retention rates, engagement scores, and your diversity metrics, like evaluating the diversity of new hires and promotions. Increased diversity can really always indicate successful recruitment based on whatever your goals are, and always come back to your goals.
Yeah, Alina, you mentioned goals earlier, and I think another important point for leadership to look at, especially if it's important as a priority or a value, is that they're keeping a regular scorecard of what belonging looks like to their organization at the leadership level and getting that engagement feedback so they know they can say they're doing a lot of good things, but unless the feedback's coming back that reinforces that, maybe a different story, right?
Right. And then when it comes back positive, make sure you communicate that so that you share in it with your employees. This is what we're doing, and this is how we feel, and this is what's happening here. So it goes a long way, but you need to communicate it.
And to me, one of the big things when we talk about scorecards, those are super important, but accountability of the scorecard to me is what makes the difference. Because you can say that you have a scorecard, but if people aren't being held accountable for the results of that scorecard, it's kind of meaningless. So that's
I'll-
why we go back to the importance of the leaders, having that buy-in from the leaders is super important. Because again, if they don't buy into it, it's not going to trickle down to everyone else.
Exactly.
And it all comes down to the communication, making sure that we're being transparent and open and vulnerable and talking about all those things so people have a safe space to participate.
Exactly.
We've just got a few minutes. Would love to close with any other remarks that our panelists would like to offer. And then I've got some cleanup questions would love to ask our panelists as well. Can we start with those, if you don't mind?
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
Wendy, one of the questions was, what are the 4 C's that you measure in your ERG groups again?
Yeah, so for our ERGs, it's the four strategic objectives are careers, which is they focus on our professional development workshops and those type of things, as well as they also help with sometimes with talent attraction. So sometimes we'll have people from our ERGs go to career fairs and that type of thing to talk about the company. Connection is really that networking piece. Making sure that we're offering ways that people can be engaged, and it's not necessarily work related. And community is a big one for us too. It's our volunteerism, so that's one of our pillar objectives. And then culture, again, is that education piece with regards to their particular group.
Great. Lena, could you speak to this one? How often should ERG groups be meeting?
I think the way, if you look at the foundational way ERG groups should sort of work, they are basically employee led. I'm an advisor to our ERG groups. I don't lead them. I don't tell them everything to do. I might tell them some things about what might work and what might not. But basically, so when you have interest, you have people who meet, and then you tell them how the structure is from an overarching perspective. Let them really solidify the structure and then determine their meeting cadence based on what they want to accomplish for that quarter. And we look at our sort of goals quarterly and things we do. We try to deliver one event per quarter. It could be different things, but I think it's really based on the structure and the leadership that emerges from the interest and how they structure the group. Does that answer the question?
I believe so.
And if I could add, so, again, I think it depends, again, to Lena's point about the particular company. So our employee resource group members, they don't get paid. So it is a volunteer role. I know that some companies do offer some type of incentives. We do not. More so, I would say our incentives are really kind of based on the additional like leadership opportunities we engage our leaders from ERGs. But with regards to how often they should meet, again, to Lena's point, they are self-led. So they meet when they can, based on their schedule, because again, it's volunteered. They understand the objectives. We're all adults. We trust that they're going to be able to do what they need to do in the time frame that they can do it.
And then one of our first questions in the group was about recognizing, especially June is a month for Pride. Juneteenth shows up in this month as well. How do we make sure that we're having these conversations all year round and not just Black History Month or Hispanic Heritage Month? How would you recommend that employers add diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging throughout the entire year?
So for us, again, our employee resource groups play a really big role in making sure that the conversation doesn't just stop during their particular Heritage Month. We're doing programming actually monthly, whether it's an education workshop or a networking event or a volunteering event. Our particular groups are nonstop year round. So we continue to push those particular initiatives year round. Now, we definitely have probably more activity during the Heritage Months, but that it doesn't stop with just the Heritage Month.
And I agree with Wendy. That's sort of how we look at things. We have a big sort of push of things during the Heritage Month, but there are just times when you want to get together with people to have water cooler conversations on Friday or things like that that don't center around a particular thing, but it's a way to get people together talking. And even if you get 50, 35 people, it's very important for those 50 or 35 people to connect on Friday, not talk about work, do anything. And I can't take credit for that. I attribute it all to my wonderful partner in training and development and how he curates those things. But it really makes people feel like they belong to a group of people who just want to talk on Friday. They might be doing Jeopardy, I don't know, but things like that that make people really feel like they can connect with other people here, and they're free to laugh and be silly and make fools of themselves or whatever they're going to do. But yeah, things like that.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, so those months are great entry points for the conversation, but ERG groups, fostering communication, making sure you got an open and honest culture are all great ways to keep that all year round.
And just having general employee meetups, water cooler conversations, fun and games sometimes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. Well, our time is up. We could talk all
Oh
the time.
no.
Wow,
We
it flew
do.
by.
I appreciate your participation. I really want to thank our panelists, Wendy and Lena. And so please, on behalf of our audience and the Michigan Chamber, I want to give our appreciation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
You bet. And so I do want to remind our audience that we do have these conversations all year round as well through our DEI series. Our next topic will be coming up this fall. I'll talk about that shortly. So, but I do again want to thank our panelists for giving up their time and their expertise to help share these conversations with the audience. We hope that they've inspired you and find ways that you can start to include belonging as part of your regular work and intentional effort in your organization. Want to give a quick membership plug. Our members are our driving force for the Michigan Chamber, is how we are able to offer this kind of programming. So if you're a member attending today, thank you very much. If you're not a member, but you're interested in joining the community, please visit our website at michamber.com, or please give me a call or an email, bthomas@michamber.com, or Amanda Toy, atoy@michamber.com. We'd love to help you out. Again, I want to thank our sponsors. The success of our events is not possible without their amazing commitments. Definitely Dow as our leading platinum sponsor all year round. And then also our bronze sponsors, the Michigan Bankers Association, Michigan Bankers Association Workers' Compensation Fund, and CATA. Their contributions help empower our employees across the state. And so we want to thank you for that. Our next DEI event is the Path to Amplifying Allyship. Please join us October 2nd for another conversation about that. You can register now using the QR code on your screen or go to michamber.com/DEI. That is a free event. And our foundation would like to thank our audience for your support. Looking ahead, we're going to be integrating more of the series into all of our programming, so please keep a lookout or give us feedback about topics that you would like to see in the rest of our programming. Later today, you'll also receive an email survey from us. Please take a moment to share your thoughts about today's events and how we can tailor top-notch programming for your business and to help us grow your business. And in the heart of belonging, I hope you all know that the impact your presence has on all of these discussions. Thank you to the audience for our questions, and thank you for your participation. I hope you all have a great summer, and we'll see you in October, if not before.